Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be ranking every single movie that I have seen in the year 2024. It's been a relatively interesting year for movies. I will admit, I have missed a lot of supposedly the best movies that have come out this year. And usually, before I do my ranking videos, I'll go through every single movie that I missed and kind of talk about why I wish I could have seen it. But I do not have the time to do that. So instead, I'm going to quickly throw up a list on the screen. Those are some of the most important movies that have came out this year that I have not had the chance to see. Hopefully I get to see some of them soon. And when I do, I will potentially, let you guys know my thoughts and opinions on them. However, we've got 80 movies to rank. Let's go ahead and dive right into them, shall we? Alrighty, and coming in dead last place, we have Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. How are you going to take one of the most beloved animated movies, something that has definitely become kind of a cult classic over the last couple of years, somebody who is so incredibly nuanced, somebody who is a villain, but he kind of turned good and he understands the beauty of humanity now, and then decided to pump this out as a sequel? What is wrong with you? You took an incredibly cool character and you decided to take everything that was interesting about him, completely rip that away, decide, oh, you know what? He's going to actually be like so embarrassed that he's a good guy now and his old friends are going to come up, which first of all, the whole point of Megamind is that he's been alone his entire life. It's too early in the video for me to be cursing. I hate this movie with every ounce of my being. Why did they make this? Coming in 79th place, we have a movie that's just downright terrible. We have Megalopolis, or as I like to say it, Megalosuckscocalypse. This movie sucks. It's so bad. This movie was Francis Ford Coppola's passion project. He'd worked on it, started 40 years ago, and it really does feel like something that somebody picked up and was like, oh my god, yeah, I used to write this. I had this script for this like 20 years ago. Let me add to it a little bit, and then they, start working on it a little bit, and they're like, I can't remember what the point of the script was, but I'm sure if I just keep writing, eventually it'll get to me. And it never does. This movie goes into like 74 different directions, and none of them are good. The majority of the actors in here give some of their worst performances of their entire career. The visual effects are about on par with the Spy Kids movie that came out in 2008. It's a bad movie. It's just a straight up bad movie. Coming in 78th place, we have one of the most generic movies that came out on Netflix, the movie Atlas. You had Sterling K. Brown and Simu Liu in this movie, and I still could not get on board with it. You know how bad a movie has to be for me to not enjoy a movie that has those two actors in it? Absolutely terrible. The visual effects are not great. The plot is so bad. I hated every second of this. And speaking of Netflix and bad, coming in 77th place, we have Rebel Moon, The Scargiver Part 2. This movie was absolutely terrible. There are a couple of sequences of it that are absolutely beautiful and looks like they would be good as, I don't know, maybe a screensaver on a computer. The action in this movie is incredibly underwhelming. The storytelling is so painfully slow and none of the characters are interesting. Also, the fake fictional army for the villains in this movie somehow make the stormtroopers from the Star Wars movies look like the greatest army in the galaxy. They are so painfully stupid. They're so bad. Their aim is even worse somehow. Just straight up a terrible movie. Coming in 76th place, we have The Strangers Chapter 1. You know the Strangers movie that came out, about like 10, 15 years ago? Imagine if they did that movie again, but not as good. That's exactly what this movie is. I feel like this movie would have benefited from maybe being, I don't know, like 80 minutes shorter. It's got a 90-minute runtime, by the way. Everything in this movie just feels like it's beating around the bush, beating around the bush, beating around the bush. There are multiple times where the people who are, the victims in this story have a chance to get the upper hand on the strangers, and they don't. Because the plot calls for them to not do anything. It is so painfully bad and stupid, and it's not scary at all. They kill their own tension because they're like building up the suspense, building up the suspense, building up the suspense. 10 minutes later, oh, they're still building up the suspense. That's not how horror works. Coming in 75th place, another Netflix original movie. We got the movie Lift. This feels like they had a really generic heist movie, and they're like, you know what? We need an action star. Okay, get the guy from Central Intelligence. Yeah. Dwayne Johnson. Oh, you meant Dwayne Johnson? No, sorry, we got the little one. Kevin Hart as a serious action hero? What are you doing? I actually gave this movie a big solid chance because I was like, you know what? If nothing else, Kevin Hart is in this. He's going to be hilarious. He's not. He's not. How are you going to have Kevin Hart in a movie and it not be funny? And it's a heist movie. How do you make a boring heist movie? In 74th place, once again, Netflix strikes again. We have the movie The Union. You have Halle Berry, one of the most talented actresses ever, somebody who has incredible chemistry with literally everybody, and then you put her with one of the most dislikable people, Mark Wahlberg, and you get this slop fest of a movie. Mark Wahlberg's out here playing like a blue-collar man who's like, so dirt broken. He's had to work his entire life, but he looks like a pretty boy the entire movie. And then they make jokes about like him being a blue-collar guy, so he doesn't understand certain things, like the fact that cars have push to start. That has been a thing since 2010. Since 2010, it's been a mainstream thing. At least 2014, almost every car you buy can have push to start. And that's one of the main jokes that I remember for this movie, just being like, well, that was really stupid. And then on top of that, this movie has lackluster action. They couldn't come up with a more creative name than a secret agency than The Union. Just so lazy writing and terrible acting and really bad casting. In 73rd place, we have the movie Tarot. I feel like this movie is just one of the most generic movies ever. They get a bunch of teenagers, they put them in a room where they're gonna like party and have a good time. They mess with forces they don't understand. They all end up dying. Nothing really interesting or particularly new about this, and it is one of the most forgettable movies that have came out this year. And in 72nd place, we have the movie Night Swim. They realize in this movie that the new house that they just bought that has a swimming pool, the swimming pool is haunted. You know what they decided to do right after that? Throw a pool party? I'm not even joking. That's something they do in this movie. Blumhouse, what are you doing? Overall, this movie could have been decent, but overall, the family's not very likable. I feel like Wyatt Russell's character having like this deep desire that he always wanted to chase his dreams, and you know he's gonna take this drug, this miracle thing, and he's gonna take the offer that the demon in his pool is giving him so that he can live his dream. It doesn't work for me. None of it works for me. All of the stuff with like the children being lured into the pool doesn't work for me. There's one specific horror sequence that kind of worked a little bit, and that's it. This whole movie just felt like a giant waste of time. Coming in 71st, we have another Blumhouse mistake. We have the movie Imaginary. I feel like this movie had a really interesting concept. I liked the whole, like, we're going to have an imaginary friend. The little girl's going to get lured in by this imaginary friend, do a bunch of things she doesn't need to be doing. And then they do almost nothing interesting with the concept. It just feels like the most generic horror movie ever with an insanely unlikable family. I don't understand how Blumhouse managed to make so many movies this year with so many unlikable characters. One of the main things that makes horror movies fun is actually enjoying the main characters and hoping that they survive. This entire movie, almost any of the characters could have died, and I would have been like, thank God, something's finally happening. That's not how a horror movie should work. In 70th place, this kind of goes to show how bad 2024 has been. I have Madam Web. I had 9 movies below Madam Web. And it's Madam Web. I will say this, part of the reason this movie is a little bit higher on my list isn't because I think it's a good movie, but because it was so painfully bad that it was entertaining to watch. I feel like this movie was at least a good one to like laugh at with your friends. Like if you went to the theaters to watch this with a group of friends and you guys were making jokes the entire time, it was a great experience. And something about these Sonyverse movies I will kind of miss a little bit. Coming in 69th place, we have a movie that I've just never really liked this franchise, Despicable Me 4. I feel like the first movie was okay, like Despicable Me 1 was okay, and then they just kept doing it again and again and again. And the Minions, I feel like their sense of humor just doesn't work for me. It's just really annoying. And then they were like, you know what? We have this trope that's really annoying in comedies. Let's add a baby character. And add all of those annoying humorous tropes. So, in my opinion, this is just the most unfunniest of the bunch. I feel like the villain's relatively forgettable, and I just think that this movie franchise should have been put to bed forever ago. Coming in 68th place, we have Kung Fu Panda 4. DreamWorks, count your days. This movie was supposed to be incredible. You tease Tai Lung is going to be in it. Oh my god, Tai Lung is going to be in it. You have a villain named the Chameleon. Oh, that's so cool. They're going to infiltrate the palace. They're going to pretend to be somebody they're not. There's going to be a lot of really epic action sequences. No, she decides to hide in a tower the entire time. Poe and all of them have to go and find the Chameleon. Why is the Chameleon not blending in and using her powers in a really cool way? Why are there not a lot of really cool action sequences using the Chameleon in this movie? Why does none of this stuff actually work relatively well? Also, the stuff with like, there's gotta be a new Dragon Warrior, just so out of the blue. And oh my god, Poe, you need to choose the Dragon Warrior. They had a very interesting, intricate way of deciding who the Dragon Warrior was in the original Kung Fu Panda movie. And in this movie, they just felt like, okay, we just need a new Dragon Warrior, so we're literally gonna handpick one. That's not how this works. Look at your own movies, see the rules you've established, and go off of that. Oh my god. In 67th place, we have the movie The Platform 2. If you like the first Platform movie, it's the exact same movie, basically. They don't do anything interesting to add to the premise. I feel like there's not really that much cool horror aspects. I definitely think that the overall concept is very interesting. And I like kind of like the psychology stuff that goes behind it. But overall, like I said, they don't add anything new to it. So as far as like the substance goes, it's not really worth watching. And coming in 66th place, we have Sydney Sweeney's Immaculate. I feel like this movie was just painfully slow to get to the point. And then throughout this entire course of this movie, she just moved to Italy, and there's a bunch of people speaking in Italy, and her character has zero plans to ever speak Italian. She's there for 9 months, obviously, because she gets pregnant. And the way that this movie ends with like a 10-minute long slow take of her giving birth, you have to watch that, and it's very gruesome. And then her biting off the umbilical cord and then smashing. No, just no. In 65th place, this was a movie I really painfully wanted to watch, but it was. We got the movie Argylle, an interesting spy movie. There's some action sequences that work relatively well. I think that the concept could have been executed a little bit better, but the way that this movie goes is, oh my god, this person gets dragged onto some creepy little mission, and they're not a spy. They're not able to handle these things. Oh my god, what's going to happen? Oh my god, Sam Rockwell is going to lead her to safety. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fantastic. And then we get to the middle of the movie, and then it's like, okay, here's this plot twist. No way. We go for 10 minutes. Here's another plot twist. No way. It goes another 5 minutes. Plot twist. Oh my god, no way. And then another plot twist. And I swear in the middle of this movie, there are like 5 plot twists back to back to back to back to back. And only one of them hit for me. So overall, not a very big fan of this movie. I just feel like there are some colorful aspects of it that work a little bit, but for the most part, it just falls very flat. In 64th place, we have the movie Spaceman that came out on Netflix. I love it when Adam Sandler decides to do more serious roles, and I think for the most part, this movie actually worked decently for me. I really like the whole point that he's out in outer space for so long that his loneliness accidentally creates a monster who's in the jet with him, and he kind of has to befriend this spider guy who's just basically being his therapist the entire movie. My only thing about this movie is it is basically just an hour and a half long therapy session where the spider calls him out for being lonely and being a terrible person, and you could only watch that for so long before it gets very repetitive. But that being said, I thought this one had a good concept. Coming in 63rd, we're finally getting to movies I enjoyed at least a little bit. We have the movie Musica. This one came out on Amazon Prime. It was written, produced, directed by Rudy Mancuso, somebody who was very famous on Vine back in the day. And this movie is a fun little rom-com that has a lot of music in it, a lot of really fun colors. I feel like it's very whimsical. I think that him and Camila Mendes had a really good kind of chemistry in this. I think that there's a really decent romance story in here. Not anything special. It definitely feels like a generic rom-com, but I enjoyed it, and I had a good time with it, so thank you for that. In 62nd place, we have Ghostbusters Afterlife. I really wanted to enjoy this movie more, but I cannot get over the fact that they have 2 of the most talented young and up-and-coming actors and actresses, and they did not just give them the reins to this film right. I feel like this franchise 100% needed to be moving forward. We needed to get more McKenna Grace. We needed to let her be the main character. We needed to let Finn Wolfhard have a really cool, interesting side plot. We needed to let them be the Ghostbusters, and for some reason, they decided, you know what, we need 12 Ghostbusters. We're going to bring back literally all of the original Ghostbusters. We're going to introduce somebody named the Fire King, and it's just such an over-convoluted story. The main villain shows up for literally about 5 minutes in the final act, and he's taken care of just like that, and there's so much that they could have done in this movie that they just felt like they didn't have confidence in what they were putting out, and I really hate that. Coming in 61st place, we have the movie Cuckoo. I love Hunter Schafer to death, and I think that this movie definitely had a lot of potential. I think that her acting performance in this is incredible, and I think that Dan Stevens' acting performance in this is absolutely incredible, but overall, the story is relatively convoluted. I feel like it has the problem that a lot of psychological thrillers have, which is that overall, every single time something scary happens in this movie, it'll cut away to her waking up in a bed, being really confused, and everybody kind of gaslighting her into believing that whatever happened didn't happen. And because we didn't have any other characters who throughout the course of the movie was like, yeah, that thing that happened, yeah, it actually happened. Yeah, your bruises that you're going through, yeah, those are things that actually were caused by the thing that you thought you saw. You know, the thing you thought you saw, yeah, that actually happened. And it really bothers me because they have this very deep, meticulous, well thought out story, but they don't do a really good job of telling us the story and explaining it to the audience. I really wanted to get on board with this movie, but I couldn't comprehend so much of this story, and it was so hard to digest. I feel like if I gave this one another couple watches, I might have gotten it, but the problem is I shouldn't have to watch a movie 4 times to get it. You know what I mean? Coming in 60th place, this was a movie I very desperately wanted to watch. We got the movie Drive Away Dolls. I thought that this movie could have been incredible if they just made it a fun little lesbian rom-com road trip movie. I feel like the 2 main actresses have incredible chemistry together. They're absolutely funny. Margaret Qualley is fantastic in this, but for some reason they don't know what they want to do with this movie. They have, like I said, that fun little rom-com dynamic, and it definitely feels like it could just be a really funny movie where these 2 are going on an adventure together, but then they decide to do some weird murder mystery, and oh my god, there's this briefcase, and everybody wants the briefcase, and they got to get their hands on the briefcase, and then it randomly becomes a very dark mafia-esque movie, and it feels so out of nowhere. And overall, this entire movie, I feel like there's an A plot, a B plot, a C plot. They don't come together well at all. And now in 59th place, we have the movie Orion in the Dark. I'm a big fan of DreamWorks. I think that this was a very cute movie, and I think that the Dark was a very fun character, and I really like the overall concept of this, the kind of like bedtime story, kind of like almost like a Christmas Carol style movie, where the kid is kind of going over, oh my god, these are all these things that I did when I was younger, and I definitely think that there's a lot of fun animation and stuff here, but it just did not click well with me. Alrighty, and coming in 58th place, we have the movie Self-Reliance. This was Jake Johnson's directorial debut, and I think for the most part, this movie was actually pretty good. I think that the comedy, for the most part, for me, worked really well. I feel like him and Anna Kendrick actually had incredible chemistry in this movie, and I think for the most part, I think that this movie was a really interesting kind of like cautionary tale of how like Mr. Beast is low-key creating a society that isn't incredibly safe. A lot of people are going to start believing everything on the internet because they're going to be like, oh my god, I'll give you $1,000 if you do this thing, and because Mr. Beast exists, you're going to be like, okay, well, you know what, there's actually a chance of me winning this $1,000. Maybe I should do this. And I think that this is kind of a very interesting concept, and I think it's one of the more original movies I've seen. I feel like a lot of the ending is underwhelming, but for the most part, I really liked this one. And coming in 57th place, we have Godzilla x Kong: A New Empire. Personally, I think this is one of the worst movies of this entire franchise. I think that for the most part, the action sequences don't work incredibly well, and I feel like when you're making a movie about kaiju and you're taking it out of a world in which we have like skyscrapers and stuff that we can relate to, it's really hard to understand that these are like really tall creatures. There are a lot of fight sequences where they are fighting each other and they're in an underground world and you can't see anything that is even remotely like familiar to you, and it's like the scaling issue for me is just really gone here. It's really hard to understand what's going on when it's going on. I feel like there's a couple of action sequences that work relatively well. I love the stuff with King Kong swinging around a baby gorilla and using him as a weapon, but like there's not a whole lot of substance in this film, and I feel like for the most part, they almost try to just throw away the human story, and none of these characters have really anything interesting or compelling going on. And I also feel like this is like the weirdest group of people to just throw together, but they were like, okay, well, these people were in a movie before, and these people were in a movie before, so let's just put them in here. And then Dan Stevens shows up, and he is a Goliath dentist. He's over here being a dentist for like all kinds of kaiju monsters. How do you even get that job? I have no idea, but I feel like this movie just has too much flair and not enough substance, in my opinion. Coming in 56th place, I love the aesthetics of this movie so much. The movie Maxine, I feel like for the most part, the horror aspects are okay in this. I think that there are a couple of sequences where they use practical effects and they use a lot of like slime and makeup to kind of make some really interesting stuff, but for the most part, all of the kill sequences that happen in this movie, we don't really get to see much of because they're trying to focus mostly on Maxine, the focal character, which is important, right? I think that that's great, but at the same time, it's taking away from the whodunit aspect of this film because we don't really get to see the slashings that are happening in this slasher film. It's very unclear what is going on when a lot of the people die, and at the very end of the movie, when the villain is kind of like captured, the entire like climax of the movie happens, and we're watching Maxine as the actual important stuff is happening elsewhere, and it's kind of very underwhelming. Coming in 55th place, we have the movie Ricky Stenicki. I feel like this was actually a really good comedy, and I might get a lot of slack for this. I think that this is one of the funniest movies that has came out the entire year. I think that John Cena just kind of proves that he is an incredible comedic actor with this. I think that Zac Efron also has a whole lot of fun in this, and just overall, this cast is pretty well done. I think that overall, obviously, this movie doesn't have a very interesting plot, doesn't have a lot of compelling characters, but as far as just standalone comedy goes, it's pretty damn good. In 54th place, we have Speak No Evil. You get James McAvoy playing a psychopath in a movie. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to enjoy it. I feel like for the most part, the two main characters aren't very likable. I feel like that's one of my main takeaways from this movie is that they have a little like relationship that's on the rocks. They don't have a whole lot good things going on. And it kind of makes it a lot harder to root for them at the end whenever there's like a lot of like bad things going down. But I think that they do a really good job of like building up the mystery of what's wrong with this child. Why is he not speaking? Why is he having all these problems? What's going on with this family, this couple that they just met on vacation? There's something sincerely off about them, and I think that the way that they unpack the mystery in this movie works well for me. Coming in 53rd place, I really wanted to like this movie more, but we have the movie Carry On. I like the whole concept of like, hey, let's do Die Hard, but in a different location. And doing it in an airport works relatively well. I think that there's a lot of really bad on the nose, like Netflixisms is what I'm going to call it. There's like a lot of jokes that would only happen in Netflix original movies. There's a lot of sequences that once again just makes this movie feel very Netflix. And eventually there gets to a point where like eventually everything gets better. But in my opinion, that happens too late in the film. I really love Jason Bateman and I really, really love Taron Egerton. They're two actors who I would watch them do literally anything. And for some reason, this movie still did not quite work for me. I will say this, I am probably going to rewatch it again. Like I said, the end of this movie, it gets significantly better. So I want to just like dive into it again, knowing that it ends better and see if I like it more. But as of right now, it's going to be in this spot. Coming in 52nd, we have The Book of Clarence. I feel like this movie had too many tones going on. I really enjoyed it. I think that the story is really interesting. I like the whole concept of there being a false prophet and somebody realizing, hold up, a lot of people are believing in this religious figure. You know how easy it would be to pretend to be this religious figure, and then somebody going around and kind of profiting off of, you know, people who are blindly following religion. I think that it's interesting. They do a lot of meta commentaries on blind faith, and I really like Lakeith Stanfield's performance in this movie. I think that he has a lot of charisma to him. I think that his comedic timing is incredible. I think that the love story that they do in here is interesting, but at the same time, this movie has scenes where like they're just messing around and they're getting high, and then they have scenes where it's like a giant action scene where like an immortal being is chasing down thugs and he's beating up these people who are being bad, and then, you know, he gets shot in the Achilles and it's the most dramatic death sequence ever. And then we're also seeing a crucifixion. Yeah, this movie's a little all over the place. It's a little messy, but I did have a good time with it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. In 51st place, we have another movie that's a giant mess, The Killer's Game. This one to me feels like a video game. If you've ever seen like all the commercials for Super Smash Bros. Brawl whenever they were making the new one, and they're like, and this person joins the fight. It's like a montage of that at the very end of this movie, and it's just a bunch of different assassins with a bunch of different random shticks chasing after Dave Bautista, and I actually had a lot of fun with it. I think that as far as dumb action goes, it's pretty damn good, and I think that the editors had an incredible time making this movie. I feel like there's a lot of like cool sequences that are shot well, obviously, but then edited just to perfection. There's a lot of fun stylistic decisions made. There's a lot of really cool, colorful pops. I think that there's a lot of jokes that are made in the editing, which you don't really see that often. So overall, I did not like this movie, right? I didn't think that the characters were that interesting, and I didn't think that the story worked, but the editing is so good that I had to have it this high on this list. Coming in 50th place, we have The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Look, you make a movie, you have Alan Ritchson and you have Henry Cavill killing a bunch of Nazis. Yeah, it's hard for me to not enjoy that movie. I think that there's a lot of fun to be had with this movie. I think that the side plots in it are kind of like really drawn out, and I feel like they don't do a whole lot to actually add to the plot of this movie. And then I think that another thing this movie fails with is at no point does it ever feel like our good guys could potentially actually be in danger. I feel like they just have the upper hand so much that even though it is fun watching them going around killing Nazis, at some point you kind of think about the fact that like, okay, but like they're just killing people who are unprepared. Like this isn't really, as far as action goes, it's not very fulfilling, but it's still pretty fun. Alright, and coming in 49th place, we have the movie Brothers. This one stars Josh Brolin and Peter Dinklage as this weird little ragtag team of brothers who are in a weird crime family, and they are, you know, getting the deal of a lifetime, and they just need to go on one more mission together and they can make a bunch of money, so they go and they do it, and it's a fun little road trip movie. Marissa Tomei shows up and is a very eccentric character that's really weird, and I think that this movie is a lot of fun. I think that the comedy is one of the best parts about it. Brendan Fraser plays a cop that is absolutely off his rocker who's chasing them the entire time, and I just think that it's a very fun, like, almost like globetrotting movie, except for, you know, obviously it's just one country. I believe they just are going on a road trip across America, and there's some fun to be had in this movie. In 48th, we have Moana 2. I did enjoy this movie. I think that there's a lot of aspects of this movie that worked relatively well for me. As much as I'm not a big fan of Dwayne The Rock Johnson, I think that Maui, once again, is very entertaining in this movie. And I think that Moana herself has an incredible journey, and I love everything that they do in the third act of this film. But for me, it does feel a little bit like the most cliche sequel ever, and I feel like it really feels like it's ripping off the first Moana movie. They repeat a lot of the story beats. In my opinion, the main like power ballad song that she has is essentially How Far I'll Go again. And same thing with like the You're Welcome song for this movie. Dwayne The Rock Johnson needed to have a song, and they're like, what if we make You're Welcome again? And that's basically what they did. So I like it, but it is very derivative. Now, coming in 47th place, we have the Netflix original movie Damsel. I feel like this movie could have worked a little bit better if they stayed in the whimsical kind of fairy tale side of the story a little bit longer. But that being said, the visual effects are absolutely incredible here. I like the fact that they quickly are able to turn what feels like a fairy tale story where this girl is just like, oh my god, I'm going to be a princess. I just found the love of my life. This is going to be fantastic, to, oh my god, I'm stuck in a cave with a dragon. That flip it works really, really well for me. And I think that Millie Bobby Brown's acting in this is absolutely incredible. There are a lot of sequences where it's like 3 or 4 minutes long where there's not a single line of dialogue. You're just having to like read her body language, her facial emotions, and she's acting, and her scene partner is a dragon that gets CGI'd in later. I think that it's an incredible acting performance. And for me, the one thing that it's just missing is this movie immediately skipped to the good part, which in theory should be good, but because of it, it doesn't feel as rewarding. In 46th place, we have Venom: The Last Dance. I feel like this movie is incredibly fun. I think that they finally kind of nailed the energy that they want with this movie. It's just a fun little silly goofy movie. Venom is dancing in Vegas. He goes gambling. We have the fun little horse Venom sequence, and we just have a lot of silly little moments like that. I feel like there's not necessarily any action sequences that stand out particularly well, but they did introduce Nolan. He was actually in the movie a lot more than I was expecting him to be. I really appreciated that involvement, and I think that this is a relatively good send-off for this character. And in 45th place, we have the movie Roadhouse on Amazon Prime. I had a really good time with this movie. I think that Jake Gyllenhaal got to show once again that he's an incredible action star. This really reminded me of Southpaw with him. All of his action sequences work really, really well. And I feel like this entire city feels very interesting. Like, I love the story of a local hero, and they do such a good job of making him a local hero in this movie. And Conor McGregor is just such a joy to watch. He's a very interesting villain. He's so off his rocker. He's so unhinged that there's a lot of action sequences where you don't even know what's going to happen next. Genuinely anything feels like it could happen in this movie, and I really, really enjoy it. And I feel like some of the best action moments in this movie feels like it was ripped from an anime or something. There's a lot of style in the fight sequences, which I really enjoyed. Coming in 44th place, we have the movie It Ends With Us. I think that this movie is an incredible cautionary tale. I feel like it's a movie about something incredibly, incredibly important, and they do a really good job kind of showcasing how love can really blind you to some of the toxic moments that are happening in relationships. And I do think that the monologue at the end of the movie where she's explaining to I'm currently blanking on his name, but the love interest that she has, who's very toxic and abusive, and she's explaining how he's done all of these shitty things, and oh my god, I need you to never go near my daughter ever again. You are a monster. You are a horrible person, and I don't think you deserve love. And I love that sequence. I think that that monologue is incredibly well done. I think that Blake Lively is so typecasted in this movie. It's not even funny. I think that this movie probably would have worked with almost anybody else, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. I liked it. And I think that the way that they were able to kind of interweave the flashbacks and the actual regular up-to-date story in this movie was pretty well done. Coming in 43rd place, I know this is a hot take, but I actually really enjoyed Joker Folie à Deux. I feel like one of my biggest gripes with the original Joker movie was that he didn't feel like the Joker. He was somebody who was just Arthur Fleck. This is a character's name who's made up. Honestly, I don't even think Arthur Fleck was necessarily his name in the comics. There's been a lot of different names for the Joker in the comics. So Arthur Fleck, completely different character. He turns into the Joker at the end of the movie. And then they decide to have a trial, and they take a look back at all the stuff that's happening in the first movie. And does he have multiple personalities? What's going on with that? Was he going insane? What is up with this guy? What is his deal? And I like that this movie lets him discover on his own by the end of the movie that he's not the Joker. He never really was. And I like the fact that all of the people who've been supporting him this entire time haven't been supporting him. They've been supporting somebody they thought he was. And it does a really good job of kind of showcasing how having a fan base, having a bunch of supporters doesn't really mean a lot when the supporters don't support what's actually best for you. And I think that there's some good kind of meta commentaries in this movie, and I think that the musical sequences for the most part worked really well with me, and I really liked the swings that Todd Phillips took with this movie. If nothing else, it definitely was one of the more unique movies I've seen this year, and I really appreciated it for that. In 42nd, we have a stupid little slasher film, Founders Day. Every single twist that could possibly be happening in this movie happens. There are so many people who die. Almost every single named character in this movie dies. And I know that that's a really big spoiler. I don't care. It is incredibly shocking to me how, when they finally get down to, okay, there's only 3 people left. That's awesome. Another one of them died. And then, oh my God, there's only 2 people. Another one died. It was crazy. This movie was absolutely fantastic. I love the way that they have incredibly high stakes. I love the way that they built this around this election with 2 people who are so overtly on the nose, supposed to be kind of metaphors for other people. And I just love how into it they get. I think that this movie is one of the stupidest movies I've ever seen, but the actors are playing into it and are dialed in 100%, and it makes it so fun to watch. I feel like this movie knew it was going to be ridiculous, and they played into it, and it works so well for me for that exact reason. In 41st place, we have Kraven the Hunter. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. I think this is the best Bumsy movie. I think that, for one, it feels incredibly organic. I feel like all of these villains being in the same place, chasing after the same things, make a lot of sense. I feel like this movie is one of the most, like, okay, Spider-Man, yeah, these are Spider-Man villains, but does Spider-Man need to be in the movie? Not necessarily. Kraven the Hunter is just somebody who hunts people. So now he could just go hunt somebody else. So him versus Rhino makes sense to me. I liked it. I think that everything that they did with it worked relatively well. Aaron Taylor Johnson brings so much charisma that it's really hard to not like his performance. And I actually really like how on the nose and overt they are with a lot of the dialogue. I think that a lot of the dialogue is just so obviously like, okay, you know what? They're going to love it. We're going to say this guy's kind of like a chameleon because that's who he is in the comics. Oh my God. I thought it was funny. I actually genuinely had a great time with this movie. I thought, if nothing else, it was insanely entertaining. And now, officially at the halfway mark, coming in 40th place, we have the movie If. I think this is one of the best original children's movies that have been made in the last couple of years. I think that John Krasinski did an incredible job writing and directing this film, and I really like the way that it kind of touches on how everybody wants to, you know, explore their inner youth. You want to be able to bring out that childlike sense of wonder, and I think that this movie does an incredible job of bringing that out. I think that everything with the imaginary friends is interesting. The way that they have some of the older adults who have, you know, outgrown their imaginary friends, meeting them again is so sweet and wholesome, and I absolutely love that. And just overall, I feel like this movie is so full of life and whimsy, and there's actually a scene in this movie that made me cry. So for that alone, I had to put it higher up on this list. Coming in 39th place, we have the movie Y2K. I've talked about this movie a couple of times. I really liked it. I think that the fact that they knew exactly what they wanted to do with this movie, they wanted it to be a silly little goofy movie that takes place, you know, right around the year 2000. And people are just, you know, making diss tracks and being freaking fresh and stuff like that. It's so stupid. It's so overtly, you know, 2000s, and I actually really like the fact that they fully went for it. I think that as far as like the horror aspects of this movie, that was considered a horror movie, not very great, but for the most part, I love the vibes, and I loved kind of the coming of age sense here, where it's like, okay, what if we made a coming of age movie during the end of the world? I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. And speaking of an unorthodox coming-of-age movie, we got the movie Velma. This movie to me kind of felt like a coming-of-age movie for senior citizens when you realize, okay, well, I've always liked being on my own. I really enjoyed having my own home. And, like, what does it mean when you are coming to that age where you're like, I need help. I need to go to a retirement home. I need to surround myself with other people that are my age. I need to do whatever I can to help myself. And I like that we kind of had like this one big last adventure with Velma. And I like the fact that there's a lot of sequences in here that are shot very like Mission Impossible-esque, but she is an old lady, so she can only do so much, and she's moving so slowly. And just the comedic aspects of this movie are incredible, and I really like the way that they filmed it. They did the score for this movie. It was a whole lot of fun. And in 37th place, we have the movie Kinds of Kindness. I think that this movie is just absolutely incredible, but it is so hard to rank it because it is split up into 3 stories. And here's my thing. The first story, incredible. If this was its own standalone little movie or whatever, obviously it'd be really short because it's like 45 minutes, whatever it is. That would probably be one of my top 10. I think that Jesse Plemons is absolutely incredible in this. I think that William Dafoe, once again, fantastic in this. And I think that it's such an interesting like commentary on like how love is toxic and how like it's really, really draining to be in a toxic relationship. But when it's all you know, you kind of want to cling to it, and you kind of want to do things that you wouldn't typically do for somebody just to keep the relationships that you have. And I think that it's so deep, it's so toxic, it's so interesting. And then we get the second one that didn't really hit for me as well. They kind of dive into cannibalism and like going insane, and it's not that interesting. And then the third one, once again, a very interesting one of what do we do when we're chasing this profit? We're chasing this profit. We're looking for something that doesn't even exist. And then eventually you find it, but you're too preoccupied in trying to, you know, keep together the different parts of your life that is falling apart. And you end up losing the thing you've been searching for so long. I think that this movie is incredibly interesting. And I like the fact that it's 3 separate stories played by the same actors and actresses, and they're all playing different characters. But that being said, it's kind of a mess, and it makes it really hard for me to rank it and put it above other movies because, like I said, I really didn't like the entire middle story out of these 3 stories. Alrighty, and coming in 36th place, we have the Netflix raunchy comedy Incoming. I am a really big sucker for anything that is coming of age related, and this movie is a coming of age story of somebody entering high school, wanting to make the best first impression ever, going to a party, and kind of not doing a great job of making a good first impression. I think that the humor in this movie is absolutely incredible. I think that Mason Thames is going to be a really, really big star in a couple of years. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I think the comedy worked well for me, and I think that the little love story here is actually also also really, really adorable. In 35th place, I know a lot of people would have this way lower, but I'm a musical theater nerd, so I got the movie Mean Girls. I think that overall Mean Girls just has an incredible story, and I think it does a really good job of kind of showcasing that everybody at the end of the day is a little mean. Like, you are going to have people in life that you disagree with, you're going to have people that you argue with, and there's nobody who is really a perfect person, right? And especially all throughout high school and during those years of your life, you're going to be mean towards somebody or other. So just the overall message of everybody's a mean girl, and the fact that, like, Regina George is the bad guy, but then also kind of so is her best friend, and kind of so is literally everybody in this movie, and I really, really love that messaging. I think that it's fantastic. I think that a lot of the music songs in this here movie actually were really good, and I think for the budget, they did an incredible job. Like, I think that all of the actors and actresses sang their hearts out, did an incredible job with the choreography, and I actually really had a good time with this movie. Coming in 34th place, we have another kind of coming-of-age story. I just did like 3 in a row. That's my bad. But Turtles All the Way Down, I absolutely love this movie. I think Isabella Merced is incredibly talented, and her ability to play somebody struggling with the mental illness that she has in this, I do not remember which one it is. I think it's like OCD, but she just has like this crippling anxiety that like everything is out to get her, and she's like constantly just thinking about everything, and she's, you know, falling in love with a guy for the first time ever, and then they kiss, and she's like panicking about like all the bacteria that are potentially going to get into her, and then she's just having a lot of like issues with her best friend who's been her best friend for so long, and they're just not really connecting the same way as they used to. I think that this movie was incredibly captivating. I think that Isabella Merced did a phenomenal job playing this main character who's so complex and has so many different issues, and I just think that overall the fact that there's a love story in this movie, but the actual love story that's really, really important is the story of the two friends kind of connecting after they have a really bad falling out. I think that this movie was really, really well written and really well directed, and it's unfortunate that this one just came out on HBO Max because I feel like it would have done decent in theaters. Coming in 35th, we have another streaming movie. We have Rebel Ridge. I love the way that they set up this movie, and a lot of people were talking about like, oh, it's going to be an action movie, and then you watch the first like hour of the movie, there's not really a whole lot of action. There's just a lot of like very firm conversations. There's a lot of tension between these two, the ex-Marine versus the person who is the police sheriff of this very shady, sketchy town, which is ran with so much corruption, and I just think that there's such an interesting like dichotomy here. They just have such a great will they, won't they kind of like fight situation. And I think that they just do such an incredible job of building tensions throughout this movie. I think that Aaron Pierre gives a stellar performance in this. And I just think that it is incredibly, incredibly cool how they're able to make a movie that feels like it should be a high pace action movie, and instead it's like a lot of understated performances that are building the tension and building the stakes of this movie. I really loved it. Alrighty, and coming in 32nd place, we have the movie Sweethearts. This was a rom-com that premiered on HBO Max, and I think that as far as the romance in this movie goes, there is none, which was a little weird. But other than that, I think that the comedy here is incredible. Once again, this is a raunchy comedy. A lot of times people will talk about comedy movies that are coming out nowadays, and they're like, oh, it's nothing like the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, they used to make a lot of inappropriate jokes, and they used to be able to like actually really swing it and make some like really like dark humor. And that's like, there are still movies doing that today. This movie was incredible. The comedy in this movie is absolutely fantastic. Caleb Heron had an incredible side plot, which like I love him to death. He's one of the funniest people ever. I'm really glad that he's starting to show up in movies, and I think that his entire subplot probably should have been the main plot of this movie. But that being said, really cool kind of coming of age movie. People kind of realizing that like codependency is really a bad thing and that they need to learn to kind of let themselves go. And I do like that they do the stereotypical like thing that they do in rom-coms where it's like a girl best friend, a guy best friend, they're in love, and they flip it, and they're like, no, they're not actually in love, they're just platonic best friends, they don't have to be in love. And I loved that. I thought that that was actually really well done in this movie. And now coming in 31st place, we have an actual rom-com, Lisa Frankenstein. This movie came out around Valentine's Day and was so good. I think for sure this movie is going to be a future cult classic. I think that Catherine Newton just has an incredible time in this movie. She just absolutely embodies this character who has like the weirdest aesthetic. She's out here doing fancy makeup styles. She's wearing interesting clothing that a lot of people back in the 80s wouldn't have worn. And she, you know, falls in love with a guy that's not alive. And that's a really interesting thing. And the way that they kind of like have her, you know, discover, oh my God, I can turn him into the real man of my dreams is so interesting. And just like the whole like scheme of her going around and like stealing body parts to kind of create this Frankenstein's monster of a boyfriend is so fun. And I think that Cole Sprouse in this movie is absolutely fantastic. And the fact that he has to do so much in this movie without actually speaking a single line of dialogue before the credits, So well done. I absolutely love this movie, and I really liked what they were able to do with it. And Catherine Newton, just an absolute star in the making. Coming in 30th, we have Transformers 1. I am so here for origin stories of movies that have been around for forever. I love franchise films, right? Like, I think that for the most part, it's actually a good thing that in the box office we have some of these franchises, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which comes back every so often, and Transformers, which comes back ever so often. And this movie introduced me to so many concepts that I had no idea about. I think that it's a really interesting thing that, like, when we think of Transformers, we think of, oh my god, they're cars that are on Earth that turn into these robot creatures, and we don't think about the fact that they are these robot creatures and then they can transform into looking like everyday objects. And I think that that is something that is really interesting, being able to go to their home world and actually see what it was like for them growing up, figuring out that they were like slaves essentially. Brian Tyree Henry's voice acting in this as Megatron is absolutely fucking incredible, and I think that this movie does a really good job of unpacking the fact that they were under a tyrannical government and they finally, you know, had the power to stand up for one another, you know, rise above. And then they had this moral battle of, okay, but if we take up the oppressive, you know, powers and we do it ourselves and we do it violently, we're not going to be any better than them. And it just does such a good job of showcasing why Optimus Prime is one of the greatest superheroes in the history of ever. Like, he genuinely is one of the most noble characters ever written, and I love him to death, and Chris Hemsworth plays him incredibly well. I was really, really pleasantly surprised with this movie. Coming in 29th place, we have arguably one of the best dad movies of the year, The Beekeeper. I, for years, have never understood the hype with Jason Statham. I've seen like 3 or 4 movies that he's in, and, you know, he's the kind of guy where he's like, he's a big, hotshot action star. He's going to show up in a movie, and he's just going to go and murder a bunch of people. He's going to do a lot of really cool, sick tricks and stuff, and he's the kind of person where it's like, a lot of people will go to see movies just because Jason Statham's in it. And I remember watching, you know, the last 4 or so movies that he's been in and being like, this guy? Why? And then I watched this movie. I get it now. It all makes sense. Josh Hutcherson playing a like rich kid who's super spoiled and a giant brat is absolutely fantastic. And I like the fact that they kind of make this movie similar to John Wick, where it's like there's this interesting world that we're living in where it's like there's a lot of like underground things that are going on. There's a lot of mafia stuff. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And they don't do a whole lot of like explaining, okay, this is what this is what that is. We just know that the Beekeeper exists. It's a top secret organization that even people who work in the CIA thought that it was a myth. And here he is doing a lot of these really cool action sequences, and he's coming up with a lot of really innovative ways to kill people, and it's so fun. And I love the fact that they were like, this is a really silly premise. He's called the Beekeeper. Let's throw in a bunch of bee puns. It's funny. It's action-packed. It is everything you want out of a fun little dad movie. Coming in 28th place, we have one of the best horror movies of the year. We have the movie The Substance. I was not planning on watching this movie originally, but I saw people were raving about it, and a lot of people were talking about how the scariest part of it was Dennis Quaid eating shrimp, and I was like, yeah, you're really selling me on a horror movie. Let me go watch this. And oh my god, the concept of this movie, the message that this movie has to say is just incredible. I love the way that they are taking Hollywood, staring them straight down and saying, hey, you guys are really shitty people. This is something that you do. You make women feel like they are not enough. And the way they just embody it is incredible. I like the whole concept of, oh, you want to be a better version of yourself. It's going to come with a price. You got to be willing to sacrifice things. And it's just such an interestingly well done concept. And I love the fact that like Margaret Qualley is kind of a villain in this movie, and like her ability to play somebody who is so menacing and somebody who's so evil and somebody who's so like self-centered. It's just so well done. And I think that this movie is just incredible. Alright, and coming in 27th place, we have one of the most divisive movies that has came out this year, Alex Garland's Civil War. I think that this movie is not at all what I was expecting it to be. For some reason, you know, you hear a movie called Civil War, it's coming out during election year, you're like, okay, this is going to be a very political driven movie. There's going to be a lot of people talking about, you know, like basic human rights and this and that. There's going to be like a very tough question to answer. And instead, it takes a little different approach. It shows you, okay, these are war journalists. They need to get pictures of this. They need to know what's going on. They need to be able to kind of capture what's going on on in the war and document it for people in the future who are going to be looking back at the Civil War and thinking, oh my God, what happened? And the fact that we're seeing this through the lens of Kaylee Spaney's character, somebody who's inexperienced but really wants to get into this world and doesn't understand how dehumanizing it is, how hard it is to take pictures of all these people who are dying and all this tragedy, and how much it like really rips away from your spirit and your soul. And you have Kristen Dunst's character, who is a lot more experienced, who's like kind of showing her the ropes and kind of explaining to her, hey, this is not a lifestyle you want to live. Trust me, it's not as glorious as it seems. It's very much going to hurt you. You're going to get yourself killed. You need to be careful. And then just having her be this mentor to her the entire length of the film. And they have this really incredible tight relationship throughout this road trip across a very broken America. And then the way that this movie ends... I loved this movie. I thought that this movie was incredible. And I liked the fact that instead of taking a strong political stance, they showed you, here's the worst of society, here's the best of society, where do you think you stand? And I think that that was really good because they just kind of like picked up a mirror and showed it to us and was like, this is where you guys are heading, fix yourself, do better. And it's really stirred the pot and created a lot of interesting conversations. I know I've had a lot of interesting conversations with people about this movie, and I love that. I think that a movie should be able to create discussion like that. Coming in 26th place, we have a rom-com that I absolutely love to death. This was a Hulu original, The Greatest Hits. I will be honest, I mostly just watched this movie because David Cornsweet is going to be in it, and I heard that around this time that he was going to be casted as Superman. So I'm like, okay, this is our Superman actor. What is he capable of? And I ended up watching this movie with very low expectations, and I ended up loving it to death. The concept of somebody who lost the love of their life in a car accident, but now they can travel back in time anytime they listen to a song that takes them back to a certain memory, and they can interact with the world around them. They can see what's going on. They can change the past. And would you change the past if you had that opportunity? It's a very interesting question. It's a really interesting motif that they use in this movie. And I think that Lucy Boynton is absolutely incredible in this. And I like the fact that they have kind of like two love stories happening in present day and in the past, and her having to learn to let go of her past so that she can live in the present. Very, very beautiful film. Alrighty, and coming in 25th place, we have the movie I Saw the TV Glow. I hope that this movie gets a bunch of Oscar buzz. I think that this movie is absolutely incredible. I think that the way that this movie kind of expresses what it's like to be transgender is absolutely incredible. I think that the fact that they're able to kind of showcase just the symbolism of having that weight on your chest, just feeling like you're literally being buried alive and there's a version of yourself out there who needs to be broken free, but you just can't reach them. And just the way that they're able to show just this suffocating feeling of being who you're not, who you don't feel like you are, like being trapped in the wrong body. I think that it is incredibly interesting. I think that Justice Smith is absolutely incredible in this. And I think that Bridget Lundy Payne, oh my God, deserves an Oscar for this. I absolutely love them in this performance. I think that they were absolutely phenomenal. And they have about a 5-minute long monologue about that feeling of being trapped, of being suffocated. And it is so captivating. I absolutely love this film. And that scene specifically has stuck with me more than any scene that has came out this year. Coming in 24th place, we have a fun little coming-of-age movie, the movie DD. I absolutely love this movie. I think that this movie just does an incredible job of understanding the time period that it takes place in. I think that DD goes through a lot of interesting societal pressures, and I think that the way that they showcase kind of peer pressure and how you feel like you have to be this different version of yourself for people to like you, the fact that you feel like you need to put out different things into the world, the fact that you always are just struggling to fit in, and it's really interesting. I think that they do a really good job showcasing him growing up in a time where social media is starting to be a really big thing, and there's just so many people around to kind of judge you and to kind of change who you are as a person. And the fact that throughout this movie, he's slowly learning more and more that maybe he just needs to be himself. And I love that. I think that that was incredible character development. And I think that the monologue that his mom gives at the end of this movie, telling him that, hey, I moved to America. I wanted to give you this opportunity. You are my dream. It's so beautiful. And coming in 23rd place, we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Rise of the War of the For the Planet of the Apes. I'm kidding. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I enjoyed this movie. I thought that it was incredible. I think that, once again, the visual effects are absolutely phenomenal. And I think that the last trilogy that they made of these were absolutely incredible. Arguably one of the greatest trilogies in the history of ever. Caesar's story throughout those 3 movies was just incredible, so breathtaking, and just incredibly, brilliant storytelling. So to have to try to follow that up and to try to make a story that is coherent and try to make a character that is as interesting, obviously they're not going to be able to hit the same highs and hit the same marks, but I think they came pretty damn close. I think that they did a really good job of trying to step into these shoes, and maybe if, you know, they put just like a little bit of newspapers at the end of those shoes, they would have filled them up perfectly. I like this movie. I think that it was an incredible start to what could potentially be a very impressive franchise and an impressive trilogy, and I'm really intrigued to see where they go with Noah's story from going forward. Alrighty, coming in 22nd place, we have Society of the Snow. This is the only foreign film that I watched this year. I know, shame on me. I really need to get out of my comfort zone a little bit, but I really enjoyed this movie. I think that this movie is incredibly dark, incredibly depressing, incredibly emotional, and I love the fact that they decided to have this movie with a narration from a character who does not survive the entire thing. I think that that was an incredible decision. We're watching everything as it's going through. We're seeing people die of sickness. We're watching people lose their best friends, their significant others. We're watching these people in such a desolate place. And I think the fact that they had the attention of detail of actually going out to this mountain range and having the people film in sub-zero temperatures is incredibly, incredibly powerful. I think that this is important that they're showing the true story and showcasing how these heroes actually had to step up and do some really tough things that you couldn't even imagine having to do. And it really does show the human spirit of how we will need to continue to survive. We will do whatever it takes to keep moving. And I just think that it is incredibly, incredibly heart-wrenching, heartwarming story. Now, coming in 21st, we have a movie that I wish did better in the box office. The movie The Fall Guy. In my opinion, this might be the funniest movie that came out the entire year. I think that Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt have incredible chemistry. I love Winston Duke in this, but honestly, I love Winston Duke in literally anything. And I am such a big fan of meta movies that take place like on a film set, or, oh my God, there's going to be a movie inside of this movie. And they're like, okay, but do we get to see the film that they're filming? Yes, we do. Okay, I love it to death. I love the fact that this movie deals so much with behind the scenes in filmmaking, and it does a good job kind of like showcasing like stunt work is not easy, right? The stunt coordinators, they have their jobs cut out for them, and I think the fact that Ryan Gosling plays the stuntman and he's actually doing all of his own stunts is incredibly cool. And there are so many amazing practical stunts in this movie. I am heartbroken that this one bombed at the box office. Coming in 20th place, finally, we're in the top quarter of these films. We got Beetlejuice. I personally am a really big fan of Tim Burton, and specifically anything that Danny Elfman does the score for. I think that the soundtrack here is absolutely incredible. I think that the score is fantastic. The music in this is all amazing. The fact that they're able to really bring us back to the same world that we were in back in the 80s is just absolutely incredible. Winona Ryder reprises her role absolutely fantastic, but I have to say, Catherine O'Hara absolutely steals the show for me. She is one of the funniest actresses and gives some of the funniest performances that I've seen this entire year. I think that Jenna Ortega does a really good job fitting right in with this universe. And overall, it's a very messy story, but because it is Beetlejuice and because it is a character that is so chaotic, I feel like it works. Alrighty, and coming in 19th place, we have, in my opinion, the scariest movie that has came out this year, Alien Romulus. I'm a really big fan of the Alien franchise. I think that these movies never failed to amaze me, and I think that they always do a really good job of actually introducing a lot of cool sci-fi elements into them. So when I heard that they were making another one, I was really excited, and Kaylee Spaney being the lead character for this is absolutely incredible. She is so captivating. Her performance in here is phenomenal. And David Johnson also gives one of the best performances I feel like I've seen in a really long time. I love whenever they're making movies about like AI or robotic creatures who potentially could, you know, have emotions, have feelings, and they're trying to, you know, become a part of humanity. And other people are just kind of treating them like shit. And a lot of people are having a really hard time, you know, being compassionate towards them. And David Johnson gives one of the most incredible performances I think I've ever seen in a movie. Like, it's so heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, all the things that he's able to do in this film, and the way that he like portrays a malfunctioning robot and it kind of is treating it like a person who has a stutter is so beautiful. And I think that their relationship that they have in this movie really does a good job of having like a heartfelt like center through line for this movie. And then the actual horror elements of this film are absolutely incredible. And I like the fact that this movie is set up in a way that it's like, here's the 3-act structure, and at the end of the third act, you think, okay, everything's gonna be fine, everything's fantastic, they're getting into the escape pod, they're going back, everything's gonna be fantastic. And then shit goes haywall again. The Offspring shows up, and it is just so terrifying. You thought that everything was fine. You thought that everything was going to be okay. The falling action at this point has came through, so you're like, okay, we made it through the hardest part of the movie. Nope, wrong. There's this guy. That was insane. And the fact that it was all practical, and the fact that they actually got an actor who's like 7'8" to show up and do this, you gotta love just the way that they did this movie. Alrighty, and coming in 18th place, I'm incredibly biased because I love all of the actors that are in this movie, but Gladiator 2 feels like one of the most like theater movies that has came out this year. Everything in the Coliseum is absolutely incredible. Literally every scene that they have that takes place in the Coliseum, I am locked in. I am not zoning out for a second. It is so captivating. They have so many interesting battle sequences. They have so many incredible gladiator sequences. The stuff with the rhinoceros, the stuff with the sharks in the water. How do they get? We're not gonna dive into that. The fact that Denzel Washington is giving one of the greatest performances ever. I feel like he just in every single movie he just elevates it to another level. Pedro Pascal is barely in this movie, but his performance is very touching and very emotional, and I absolutely love everything his character has to offer in this film. And overall, I just really, really liked this movie. I think that they had a good idea of the scale that they were going for, and they reached it. And it once again restored my faith in Ridley Scott. Thank God. Coming in 17th place, I have said this about a lot of movies, but I will say it again. I think this is the funniest movie that has came out this year. The movie Abigail. And I know you guys are thinking, Blake, isn't that the little horror movie about the little girl who's actually like the daughter of Dracula? Yes. Yes, it is. The character dynamics in this movie are so good. I feel like I've said this when I made my original review of it. The beginning of this movie feels 100% like it would be like a stereotypical heist film. Like you're watching these people, they're kidnapping this little girl or whatever, and it just seems like, okay, they're going to be doing something really cool. It's going to be a fun little crime movie. It literally has so much like high energy. I think that Angus Cloud's performance in this, R.I.P., is one of the best performances. Like it's very interesting. Like he's very funny. He's so good. Catherine Newton, once again, incredibly funny. Dan Stevens is so over the top in the fact that his character is like such like a straight character that he's just like, we're not going to do this thing. We're playing by the rules. We got to do things the way that they're supposed to be done. And he's the kind of character who you want to hate, but Dan Stevens is just like towing that line perfectly of being a character you just love. Kevin Durand is in this. He plays a giant idiot. He's also great, and I think that this movie was so funny. There's a couple of sequences in it that are actually genuinely terrifying, and overall, I just had a really good time with this movie. Alrighty, and coming in 16th place, we have Saturday Night. I'm an incredibly big fan of this movie. I think that this movie was absolutely hilarious. I think they did a really good job of showcasing kind of the spirits of Saturday Night Live. And the fact that this movie is just so good with the ticking time clock. This movie is taking place in the time span of 90 minutes, and it really feels like it stays pretty close to those 90 minutes. I think that Gabriel Lapel does an incredible job in this movie. I think that his portrayal of Lorne Michaels is fantastic. And this movie does a really good job of having you locked in. You're just as stressed as they are. There's so much going on. You have that anxiety with the entire length of the movie. Will this work? Is it going to work? Oh my God, what's going to happen? And I just love the fact that this movie grabbed my attention and ran with it the entire time. I really, really loved this movie. And now coming in 15th place, the top superhero movie in my opinion, Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm a really big Marvel fan. I'm a really big fan of Deadpool for the longest time. That first Deadpool movie was one of my favorite movies of all time, but I will say, I think that this is a movie that's not going to age very well. I watched this movie in theaters 3 times, and after the third time, I was kind of like, I don't think I want to watch this movie again. A lot of the humor is already kind of falling flat for me. I do think that the intro, however, is one of the greatest intros Marvel's ever done. I think that it is an incredible cold opening. The bye, bye, bye is definitely a huge cultural moment. And I think that that's something to really enjoy about this movie. It was a huge cultural moment. A lot of people were talking about it. A lot of people were raving about it. A lot of people were doing the dance. A lot of people were cosplaying as Wolverine again, which I absolutely loved. And I think that they did a really good job of kind of sending off the Fox X-Men universe. I feel like a lot of the cameos here don't necessarily hit the marks that they were probably expecting them to, but it was pretty cool to see some of those characters back again. I just wish that they could have gotten potentially a cameo from somebody who was in a movie in the last 10 years. Too much to ask for? Okay, I'll stop. Alrighty, and coming in number 14, we have the movie Monkey Man. Dev Patel is an incredible actor. I think that for the longest time, he has just shown his strengths in a lot of lower movies that a lot of people haven't necessarily seen. And this movie finally was his chance to shine. He was a huge action star, and I absolutely love this movie. I think that the action in it is incredible, and I think that the behind-the-scenes story really helped me enjoy this movie a lot more. It's an underdog film that actually had a behind-the-scenes moment that was also as much of an underdog. This movie is filmed in a very interesting way. They had a lot of different sequences where they ran out of budget and they literally had to record some sequences here with GoPros and cell phones and stuff like that, and it is still incredibly captivating the entire time. And I think that overall this movie has one of the best midpoints I've ever seen in a movie ever. That turning point is absolutely crazy, and I think the way that they're able to show him rising up in this movie is so triumphant. Coming in 13th place, we have A Quiet Place Day One. I do not think that this movie is particularly scary, and I think that it's actually good because I don't think this movie was trying to be scary. I think that this movie does an incredible job being almost an incredibly simple story where it's just like, okay, there's this character, they know that they're probably going to die, the end of the world is happening, and instead of trying to survive, they just want to go and do one last thing before they die, and it's go get a piece of pizza. Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn have incredible chemistry with each other throughout this entire film. The way that they're able to like become like kind of best friends in like the most like unlikely scenarios is fantastic, and I think that overall this movie is just incredibly heartfelt. I think that the fact that Joseph Quinn realizes that she probably isn't going to survive very much longer, but he wants to spend as much time as he can kind of making the rest of her life as magical as possible is so beautiful, and it is incredibly heartwarming. This movie absolutely made me cry when I watched it the first time, and I kind of left the theater and told people that it kind of felt like a live action Pixar movie, and I don't know if anybody else would agree with me on that, but if you see it and you agree, please let me know. Coming in 12th place, every year there's a Netflix movie that absolutely shocks me. This year it was It's What's Inside. This movie is basically like One Night at Werewolf, but what if these people were playing like a fun little silly game night and they switched minds with each other? And I think that they do an incredible job creating this psychological thriller where it's like, what would it be like to, you know, live in somebody else's body, and especially if it's somebody you've been jealous of in the past. And there's so many interesting love triangles and stuff happening in this movie. There's so much drama going on, and I think that they do a really fun job of kind of creating this friend dynamic where all these people are kind of at each other's throats a little bit, but because one of them is getting married and this is a bachelorette party, they really just want to have a really good time tonight. And alcohol does not mix well with party games, especially when you're in other people's minds, and this movie goes off the rails incredibly fast, and I love it. I think that this movie has incredible editing. I think that it kind of fucks with your mind a little bit in a really great way, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it, but it was definitely one of the most surprising movies of the year for me. I absolutely loved it. But in 11th place is, in my opinion, the most surprising movie of the year. This is a movie called Strange Darling. I had heard literally nothing about it before going to see this movie, and I think that that is the best way to watch it. This movie has so many incredible twists and turns. The way that they're able to tell this story in a non-linear way, and the fact that the way that they are able to organize it makes it so that you're like, oh my god, no way this thing is happening. I hope that this thing is okay. I hope that this girl in this movie is going to be all right. And then the way that they kind of progress through the story, and you kind of realize certain things that you thought were true are not true. Oh, it's great. Oh, it's twisted. Oh, and the way that this movie ends. Oh, I love it. It's so dark. It's so great. I love it to death. Coming in 10th place, we have the movie Furiosa. I think that overall, this movie is just incredible. I think that the action sequences are once again phenomenal. I think that the set pieces are incredible. I think that Chris Hemsworth gives one of the best performances of his career, if not the best performance of his career here. I think that his villain that he plays is absolutely phenomenal. And I think, once again, it does a good job playing with the best part of the Mad Max movies, in my opinion, which is there is no evil, there is no good, there is no bad. It's just a bunch of people who are so they want to survive. They just want to live. They just want to do whatever they can to survive. And there's just a bunch of people fighting for themselves, fending for themselves, and kind of creating this giant issue of there's no resources left. What are they going to do? How are they going to handle this stuff? And the whole story overarching of Furiosa really just wanting to get home and then finding out that there is no home to go to is very heartbreaking, and I absolutely love this movie, and I think that Anya Taylor-Joy did a really good job with it, and the way that they end this movie with like the story of revenge is beautiful. I love the final shot of this film. Alrighty, and coming in 9th place, we have the movie Twisters. I think that this was an incredible kind of legacy sequel type reboot. I really enjoyed this movie. I think that the comedy in it is absolutely fantastic. I think that the visual effects and everything look pretty good. And I think that Daisy Edgar-Jones and Glenn Powell just have an incredible chemistry in this movie. I think that their love story throughout this entire film is fantastic. And as somebody who is a giant sucker for enemies to lover trope, I think that they just absolutely nail it in this film. I think the fact that these people are both very passionate and they care about humans, safety and stuff like that, and they're trying to fight big corporations in this movie is really interesting. And I definitely think that this movie has a lot to say. And the only reason this movie isn't actually higher on my list is because they don't kiss at the end. You cowards. I don't care what Steven Spielberg says. Oh my god, it'd be basic. You have them kiss, goddammit. Coming in 8th place, once again, I am a sucker for coming-of-age movies. We have Inside Out 2. I think that this movie built upon the premise of Inside Out 1 and just absolutely made it 10 times better. I'm somebody who, I don't think I liked the first Inside Out movie as much as a lot of people did. So a lot of people who were like, oh my God, they're making a second one, they're going to make it worse. I was like, I don't think they could make it worse. And they just made it better. I think that anxiety was an incredible emotion. I think that Maya Hawke did an incredible job voicing this character. And the fact that they kind of just showcased how anxiety can kind of take over your emotions and it can kind of overrun everything that's going on in your life, because like if you just have too much on your plate, your anxiety is just going to take over and it's going to be scrambling and you're going to have so much hard times just focusing. And the sequence where she has her kind of anxiety attack and her panic attack is so beautifully well done, because they show obviously what's going on in her head, but also what's going on outside. And it kind of shows that she's a really young person. She doesn't understand what's going on here. She doesn't know how to deal with these emotions, and she's just really breaking down, and it's heartbreaking. I really, really love this movie, and in my opinion, it did what the first movie did relatively well, and it made it just that much better. I loved it. I love the animation style. I had a really good time with this movie. Alrighty, and coming in 7th place, we have the movie Hitman. This movie had some dark twist in it, and I absolutely loved it. I think that overall, Glenn Powell just had an incredible year. I think that this movie has, once again, incredible comedic bits. I think that a lot of the humor for me just works incredibly well. I think that, once again, there's so much palpable chemistry between the main actor and actress in this film, and I like the fact that there's a lot of, like, stuff going on with, like, okay, this person's, scared that they're gonna die. They think that their husband is out to get them, and then, their husband actually ends up, being out to get them, and they hire a hitman, and they're like, hey, there's this person, I really kind of want them dead, and then that guy dies. Really, really cool concept. I love the way that they have their scene at the end of the movie where Glenn Powell's just like, I'm on a microphone, they're gonna hear me read what I'm saying, we're gonna pretend like we're arguing and we can't figure it out, we're gonna get those together. That entire scene, I think it's like 6 minutes long or something like that, is so good. And then the fact that they end the movie by killing another person, forget about it. I loved this movie. I thought it was incredibly dark, but I loved it. Coming in 6th place, we have the movie Wicked. I think that all of the songs in here are absolutely incredible. I think that Jeff Goldblum as the wizard was incredible casting. I think that Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, literally the entire cast was just perfectly cast. I think that the atmosphere that they created, the Oz that they created was absolutely phenomenal. The beautiful sets. I mean, you just look at Shiz University and it is just gorgeous. It's so beautiful, and the entire film is just absolutely beautiful. I think that there's a couple of issues that I have kind of with pacing, but that is because I've seen the original Broadway musical, and if you don't know, they kind of slow it down a little bit, which makes it where different scenes and different emotional beats have more time to breathe. But because it's not what I was used to, it felt a little different for me. But that being said, as somebody who's a huge fan of musicals, this one did it for me. I loved it to death. And coming in 5th place, this one might be a little bit of recency biasy. I will say I did literally watch this movie in preparation of this video, because I was at 79 movies and I was like, I gotta watch one more. What's a good movie that's supposedly out right now? Juror number 2. Oh my God, Nicholas Hoult, for one, finally is like the actual like lead in a movie. And he is so good. His acting is incredible. He's so captivating. The emotional depth that he is able to portray in this movie is just fantastic. And if you haven't seen the movie, I would say skip to the next one. But oh my God, just the concept of showing up as, just an innocent person who's doing jury duty and you really don't want to be there. And then like slowly discovering, oh, this crime kind of happened on like a day that I got into like a car accident and I hit a deer. That's really weird. And then like finding out like, oh my God, their dead body was found on the road where I hit the deer. And then kind of like coming to the realization of like, I never saw the deer. I just ended up driving home and continuing on with my day. Oh my God, what happened? And discovering that he hit and killed someone, and having to kind of like deal with the like moral battle of, oh my God, I just killed somebody. What am I going to do now? That's insane. It's incredible. It's such a deep moral like conversation to have, and I love this movie. I thought that it was really, really well done and well written. Coming in 4th place, speaking of well written, we have the movie Challengers. I absolutely love this movie to death. The fact that it takes place over the time span of 13 years and it's perfectly interwoven throughout just the course of a tennis match is so beautiful to me. I think that the fact that all 3 of these actors are able to play themselves throughout those 13 years also is really well done. Like, I thought that was something really interesting, how they were able to get them to look so young for the scenes where they needed to be young and then still look so mature for the scenes where they needed them to be older. I think that the fact that they were able to make tennis interesting pretty cool. And I just think that this movie is just like one of the most best, well-written movies that I've ever seen. I think that every single scene, every single line of dialogue is important to the plot. It's crucial to the plot. If they say something in the first act, 90%, almost like 90% of the time, it's coming back in some big way, shape, or form later. There's no wasted time in this movie, and I think that that in itself is absolutely beautiful. Coming in third place, this is going to be a lot higher on my list than it is going to be on a lot of other people's lists, but it's just because I can relate to it. The movie Snack Shack. I think that if you were a teenage boy and you grew up and you had a best friend that was a teenage boy, you can really heavily relate to one of the two main characters here. And I think that I can really, really relate to the main character in this movie. And part of the reason why I really liked it is just because it felt so personal to me. I really think that this movie, it hits the raunchy comedy that you really would want out of a movie like this. It's a teenage coming-of-age movie. These guys are in one of their last years of high school. It's the summertime. They're going to go have fun and just go and do a bunch of reckless stuff. At the beginning of the movie, they're literally betting on illegal horse races. They are making their own beer. They're just having the time of their lives, and it's just boys will be boys until a girl comes between them. What's going to happen to their friendship? It's a very simple movie, but I absolutely love it to death. And then at the end, they do something that is completely unexpected and really kind of just shows you the beauty of life and how you need to take everything, as it comes. You need to just be so appreciative of what you have right now, because it could be gone in an instant and you would never really be prepared for that. And now our runner-up, coming in second place, we have the movie Wild Robot. This movie is incredibly emotionally impactful. I think that the animation style is absolutely flawless. I think that the voice acting is phenomenal from literally every single person in this movie. Some of the jokes were a lot more mature than I was expecting them to be. I was laughing my ass off a lot during this movie, and I was also crying a lot throughout this movie. I think that this movie did a really good job of kind of showcasing somebody who gets ridiculed and somebody who isn't, trusted entering a new area, and somebody who's really struggling to fit in. And then by the end of the movie, they are embraced by their community. And it's such a beautiful turnaround. And I think that Roz has just one of the most beautiful stories throughout any movie I've ever seen. It's up there with The Iron Giant. It's up there with just some of the best character studies I've ever seen. I loved this movie to death, and I really, really hope we get more movies similar to this. They picked a book that had a really good story, and they decided, let's make this. Let's do it. We're going to make it just as beautifully written as it is in these pages, and we need that. We need more book adaptations. And coming in first place, speaking of book adaptations, we got Dune Part 2. I think that this movie might quite literally be flawless. I think that the visual effects are phenomenal. I think that the sound design is phenomenal. I mean, there's so many just different alien noises that you hear, and it's just like, oh my god, I would have never thought of what this thing would sound like, but that is absolutely 100% correct. The fact that they actually filmed this in a desert, and they're constantly switching the dunes that they're working on so that everything looks new and fresh and original. The fact that they are so confident that they do not use green screens. The fact that they're actually going to do as much practical effects as they can is beautiful. I think that Timothée Chalamet gives one of the greatest acting performances I've ever seen in my life. I think that his monologue at the end of the movie, which is in a completely fictional language, is so captivating and just so gripping that when you're watching the movie and you're reading the stuff, you don't even realize that he's speaking in another language, because you just feel his energy, his passion, and everything he's saying. I think that Javier Bardem has one of the best supporting roles ever. I think that every single time he's like, is Lisan Al Gaib, is so funny to me. And I just think that this movie did a really good job of taking me, who wasn't a fan of Dune Part 1. I think that it's one of the most overrated movies of all time. And I got so locked into this movie. I think that it dove right into the action. It had so much captivating moments. It had incredible character work. I think that they did a really good job of foreshadowing what's to come. And just overall, one of the best false prophecy stories that's probably ever been brought to screen. I love this movie to death, and I really hope it does well at the Oscars. I think that this is the kind of movie that sometimes would get gypped for some of these things, but Denis Villeneuve definitely deserves Best Director for this. Timothée Chalamet at least deserves a nomination for his role here, and I really, really hope that all goes well with this movie. But that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you liked it and you actually stuck around for this entire video, thank you guys so much. You guys are absolutely incredible. I make these videos for you guys. This one is, I'm not even going to lie to you, probably going to take over 8 hours to make, because the filming process, obviously you see how long the video is now. The editing process usually takes about triple the amount of time as it takes to record. So however long you're seeing down there, 4 times that amount of time spent in making this video. So I really appreciate you guys who actually stuck around to watch this whole video. You guys are amazing. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow. Bow. Bow.